The communication chamber of the Zarkak's Central Command hummed with a mixture of bureaucratic efficiency and imperial arrogance. Holographic displays flickered with star charts, diplomatic records, and invasion strategies that had conquered dozens of civilizations over millennia. Supreme Coordinator Vexnera, a towering crystalline being whose neural networks represented the collective intelligence of 6 advanced species, studied the intercepted human transmission with a mixture of curiosity and mild amusement. The message was simple, almost crude by galactic communication standards. No elaborate encryption, no complex quantum-entangled communication protocols. Just a direct, almost pedestrian warning transmitted through an outdated relay station at the edge of known space. The human communication officer's voice was steady, almost bored, as if reporting a routine maintenance issue rather than delivering a potential threat. Attention collective forces, the transmission read. Approach to the Orion frontier is strongly inadvisable. Human defensive capabilities exceed standard galactic threat assessments. Engagement will result in complete mission failure. The gathered intelligence officers of the Zarkak's collective erupted in synchronized laughter. Their neural links amplified the ridicule, creating a cascading wave of dismissive energy that reverberated through the command chamber. Vexnera's own crystalline structure refracted light in patterns that translated to pure contempt. Humans were a relatively new species on the galactic stage. Their technological development had been noted but never seriously considered a threat. Early surveillance suggested a species barely capable of maintaining rudimentary interstellar colonies. Their fastest ships moved at speeds that would be considered archaic by Zarkak standards. Their weapons systems appeared primitive, relying on what seemed like antiquated missile and energy projection technologies. Senior strategist Kryak stepped forward, her multi-jointed appendages manipulating holographic data streams. Preliminary threat assessment places human military capability at less than 0.03% of our collective defensive potential, she reported. Her voice carried the clinical detachment of a species that had conquered civilizations for countless generations. The transmission itself was analyzed microsecond by microsecond. No hidden signals, no quantum-encrypted subtext, just a straightforward warning that seemed more like a joke than a genuine threat. The humans had included technical specifications that appeared almost quaint, references to defensive platforms, automated response systems, and fleet configurations that looked like museum pieces compared to Zarkak's technology. Perhaps, suggested one of the junior strategists, we should send a diplomatic response. Educate them about the realities of interstellar conflict. More laughter followed. The idea of educating humans about warfare was like explaining mathematics to primitive organisms. The Zarkak's collective had consumed entire civilizations, absorbed their technologies, and reduced resistant populations to strategic resources. Humans were barely a footnote in galactic history. Supreme Coordinator Vexnera made the decision with the casual indifference of absolute certainty. Prepare the third invasion fleet, the coordinator announced. We will demonstrate the futility of their warning and claim their resource-rich frontier systems. Let this be a lesson in humility. The decision was instantaneous. Thousands of warships began preparations, each vessel a technological marvel that had broken the resistance of countless civilizations. Quantum shield generators, antimatter projection weapons, and neural-linked combat systems represented the pinnacle of collective technological achievement. Against such overwhelming force, the human warning seemed almost comically naive. What the Zarkaks did not understand was the nature of human preparation. Every word of their transmission had been carefully calculated, every technical specification deliberately shared. The warning was not a plea or a threat, but a precise invitation, a challenge wrapped in the language of diplomatic caution. In the vast command centers of human defensive systems, strategic AI networks began their intricate preparations. Automated defense platforms, which had been quietly developed over decades of paranoid preparation, initialized targeting sequences. Quantum communication networks hummed with potential, waiting for the first sign of alien incursion. The humans knew something the Zarkaks would soon learn. True military superiority was not about the size of one's fleet, but the precision of one's response, and they had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. As the Zarkak's fleet prepared to jump into human-controlled space, no one noticed the almost imperceptible smile that seemed to flicker across the communication screens, a smile that suggested the humans were exactly where they wanted the alien fleet to be. The first wave of Zarkak's battleships emerged from quantum-slit space with the arrogance of inevitable conquerors. 12,000 vessels strong, they formed a perfect geometric invasion pattern that had crushed civilizations across 3 galactic quadrants. Advanced sensors probed the Orion frontier, expecting to find weak defensive positions and vulnerable colony clusters. Instead, they found silence. The initial moments of confusion were brief. Space seemed empty, almost serene. No incoming communications, no defensive formations, no panicked colonial transmissions. Just the vast, dark emptiness of the frontier zone. Senior Commander Zornak of the lead battleship ran preliminary scans, his neural interface pulling data from thousands of ship-based sensors. Anomalous, he transmitted to the fleet. No standard colonial defense markers, no civilian infrastructure detection. What the Zarkaks did not understand was the carefully constructed nature of human defensive strategy. Every kilometer of the frontier had been transformed into a calculated kill zone. Stealth platforms, smaller than most fighter craft, hung in perfect strategic positions. Quantum-linked sensor networks created an invisible web of detection far more sophisticated than traditional scanning technologies. The first attack came without warning. Microscopic defense drones, each no larger than a human fist, activated simultaneously across a 100,000-kilometer engagement zone. They weren't traditional weapons, but precision-guided networked platforms with adaptive targeting algorithms. Each drone carried a specialized payload designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities in alien ship technologies. The initial salvo struck with mathematical precision. Electromagnetic pulse cascades ripped through the Zarkak shields, not by brute force, but by exploiting microscopic resonance frequencies in their quantum shielding systems. Entire squadrons found their defensive capabilities compromised in milliseconds, their advanced technologies turning against them in a cascading systems failure. Defensive systems compromised. A Zarkak's communications officer screamed, her neural link broadcasting pure panic across the fleet's communication network. Unknown attack vectors. Systems are failing. The human defense network operated with a cold, calculated efficiency that was more terrifying than any traditional weapon. Each drone was connected through a quantum communication matrix that allowed instantaneous shared learning. When one drone discovered a weakness, that information was immediately distributed across the entire defensive network. Zornak watched in mounting horror as his flagship's advanced sensor arrays began to fail. The microscopic drones weren't just attacking, they were systematically dismantling the ship's technological infrastructure with surgical precision. Defensive weapon systems began to misfire, shield generators produced cascading feedback loops, and navigation computers started reporting impossible spatial coordinates. Initiate emergency protocols. Zornak commanded, but even his transmission was intercepted and fragmented by the human defensive network. The second wave of the attack came from seemingly impossible positions, automated defense platforms, which had been invisible moments before, decloaked across the entire invasion zone. These were not traditional weapons platforms, but complex, AI-driven systems that could predict and counter alien movement patterns faster than any biological intelligence could comprehend. Quantum-linked missile systems launched salvos that defied traditional ballistic physics. Each projectile carried multiple adaptive warhead configurations, capable of changing attack vectors mid-flight. They didn't just target ships, they targeted the very concept of alien technological defense. Within 7 minutes of entering the Orion frontier, the Zarkak's invasion force had lost 40% of its vessels, not through overwhelming firepower, but through a systematic deconstruction of their technological capabilities. What truly broke the alien forces was the psychological warfare inherent in the human defense strategy. The attacks were so precise, so calculatedly brutal, that they seemed almost contemptuous. It wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstrating absolute technological superiority. Intercepted communications between human defensive coordinators were chilling in their clinical detachment. Status reports were delivered with the same tone one might use when discussing routine maintenance. Casualty assessments were presented as mere statistical data points, devoid of any emotional context. Invasion force engagement, 94.3% effectiveness, one human coordinator reported, as if discussing a routine system check. The remaining Zarkak ships began emergency retreat protocols, but even this was anticipated. Human defensive platforms adjusted their targeting, creating escape corridors that funneled the alien vessels into predetermined kill zones. It was less a battle and more a clinical demonstration of technological dominance. As the last of the first invasion wave disintegrated, the human defensive network returned to standby mode. No celebrations, no dramatic communications, just a cold, mathematical assessment of mission parameters achieved. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity's true weapon was not its technology, but its ability to transform warfare into a precisely calculated problem to be solved with ruthless efficiency. The Zarkak's collective's primary battle fleet represented the pinnacle of their military might. Assembled from 6 different species, each contributing their most advanced technological innovations, the fleet was a testament to millennia of collective warfare experience. 3,000 ships strong, with vessels that had conquered civilizations across multiple galactic sectors, they approached the human frontier with a mixture of rage and calculated revenge. Supreme Strategist Fornak, a veteran of 100 conquered worlds, personally supervised the fleet's preparation. Holographic displays showed detailed analysis of the previous engagement, though engagement seemed too dignified a term for the systematic destruction they had experienced. The first wave had been obliterated with a precision that defied conventional military understanding. "We will overwhelm them," Fornak declared to the assembled fleet commanders. "Our combined technological superiority is absolute." What the Zarkaks did not comprehend was the fundamental difference in how humans approached defensive warfare. While the alien collective saw military strategy as a game of overwhelming force, humans viewed it as an intricate problem to be solved with mathematical precision. The human defensive network was already aware of the approaching fleet long before the Zarkaks entered the Orion frontier. Strategic AI systems had been analyzing the collective's movement patterns, ship configurations, and potential attack vectors for weeks. Each potential scenario had been modeled, simulated, and counter-strategies developed with clinical efficiency. As the Zarkak's fleet approached, they activated their most advanced technological defenses. Quantum shield generators capable of absorbing planet-killer weapon impacts hummed to life. Adaptive camouflage systems made ships virtually invisible to traditional scanning methods. Neural-linked combat systems allowed instantaneous strategic coordination across thousands of vessels. They expected to find a desperate human defensive line. Instead, they found nothing. The emptiness was more terrifying than any visible defense. Space seemed to swallow the massive fleet, offering no resistance, no targets. Advanced sensors detected microscopic technological signatures, remnants of the previous defensive platforms, but nothing that could pose a genuine threat to such an overwhelming force. Scanning for defensive positions, a Zarkak sensor officer reported. Multiple quantum anomalies detected, but no consolidated defensive formation. The first attack came from within. Microscopic nanite swarms, which had been quietly dispersed during the previous engagement, began systematically attacking the fleet's most vulnerable systems. These were not traditional weapons, but adaptive technological parasites that exploited the most minute vulnerabilities in alien ship technologies. Quantum shield generators began to destabilize. Navigation systems reported impossible spatial coordinates. Communication networks fractured into incomprehensible data streams. The attacks were so precise, so mathematically calculated, that they seemed to strike at the very concept of technological defense. Vornak watched in mounting horror as his flagship systems began to fail. The nanite swarms didn't destroy. They deconstructed. Each ship found its most advanced technologies turning against it, creating cascading system failures that spread with viral efficiency. Countermeasures. Vornak screamed, but even his communication was fragmented, intercepted by the human defensive network. The second wave of the attack revealed the true nature of human defensive strategy. Automated platforms that had been invisible moments before decloaked across the entire invasion zone. These were not traditional weapons, but complex AI-driven systems that could predict and counter alien movement patterns faster than any biological intelligence could comprehend. Quantum-linked missile systems launched salvos that defied traditional ballistic physics. Each projectile carried multiple adaptive warhead configurations, capable of changing attack vectors mid-flight. They didn't just target ships, they targeted the very concept of alien technological defense. What truly broke the alien forces was the psychological warfare inherent in the human response. The attacks were so precise, so calculatedly brutal, that they seemed almost contemptuous. It wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstrating absolute technological superiority. Intercepted communications between human defensive coordinators were chilling in their clinical detachment. Status reports were delivered with the same tone one might use when discussing routine maintenance. Casualty assessments were presented as mere statistical data points, devoid of any emotional context. Second invasion force engagement. 97.6% effectiveness. One human coordinator reported, as if discussing a routine system check. The remaining Zarkak ships began emergency retreat protocols, but even this was anticipated. Human defensive platforms adjusted their targeting, creating escape corridors that funneled the alien vessels into predetermined kill zones. It was less a battle and more a clinical demonstration of technological dominance. As the last of the second invasion wave disintegrated, the human defensive network returned to standby mode. No celebrations, no dramatic communications, just a cold, mathematical assessment of mission parameters achieved. The message was clear. Humanity was not just defending. They were solving a complex problem with ruthless, mathematical precision. The communication networks of the Zarkak's collective began to fracture in ways no military strategist could have predicted. What had begun as a simple punitive expedition had transformed into a psychological nightmare that challenged every fundamental understanding of warfare the collective had developed over millennia. Intercepted human communications became a source of growing terror. Each transmission was a clinical, almost casual dissection of the alien fleet's capabilities, weaknesses, and potential strategic responses. It was as if the humans were not just fighting a war, but conducting a comprehensive research study on alien military incompetence. Psychological analysis of Zarkak's fleet command structure indicates 78.3% probability of catastrophic decision-making under stress. One human communication officer reported, her voice devoid of any emotional inflection. Recommendation: continue current engagement protocol with minimal resource expenditure. The alien leadership struggled to comprehend the nature of their opponent. Traditional galactic warfare followed established protocols. There were rules, expectations, psychological pressure points that could be exploited. Civilizations typically responded to invasion with panic, with emotional outbursts, with desperate defensive maneuvers. Humans did none of these things. Their responses were algorithmic, precise, almost mathematic in their execution. Each defensive action was calculated to the microscopic level, each communication a carefully constructed piece of psychological warfare that seemed designed to do more than just defeat the enemy, to systematically deconstruct their entire conceptual understanding of conflict. Senior strategist Kryax, who had once been considered the most brilliant tactical mind in the Zarkak's collective, found herself unable to process the human approach. Their defensive networks seemed to anticipate not just tactical movements, but the very thought processes behind those movements. It was as if the humans were fighting a war several layers of abstraction beyond traditional military engagement. Quantum communication intercepts revealed something even more terrifying. The humans were not just defending. They were learning. Every engagement, every interaction, was being processed through complex AI systems that were rapidly developing a comprehensive understanding of Zarkak's military doctrine. The defensive network wasn't just responding to threats. It was actively developing predictive models that could anticipate entire strategic approaches before they were implemented. Threat assessment updated. Another human communication burst revealed. Zarkak's collective military doctrine demonstrates persistent pattern of hierarchical decision-making with 92.7% predictability. Recommended counter-strategies: mathematical isolation of decision vectors, systematic psychological destabilization. The language itself became a weapon. Each transmission was designed not just to communicate, but to psychologically deconstruct the very concept of alien military thinking. Humans reduced complex military strategies to statistical probability models, transformed emotional responses into computational problems to be solved. Zarkak's fleet commanders found their most advanced neural-linked communication systems compromised, not through brute force technological attacks, but through incredibly sophisticated psychological manipulation. Communication channels became vectors of systematic mental deconstruction. Vornak, the fleet's supreme commander, experienced this most profoundly. Human transmissions began to include detailed psychological profiles of individual fleet commanders, highlighting cognitive biases, potential emotional breaking points, and predictive behavioral models. It was less like warfare and more like a comprehensive psychological evaluation designed to systematically undermine military cohesion. "We are not just a target," one human transmission chillingly stated. "We are a problem to be solved with minimal necessary intervention." The collective's neural networks began to show signs of systemic stress. Millennia of conquest had never prepared them for an opponent that viewed conflict as a complex mathematical equation to be solved with clinical precision. Humans didn't just fight, they analyzed, predicted, and systematically neutralized with a detachment that was more terrifying than any weapon. Diplomatic channels, typically a last resort in galactic conflicts, became another front in the psychological warfare. Human representatives responded to potential communication attempts with such calculated neutrality that it became a form of psychological torture. Each response was a precise deconstruction of the Zarkak's strategic and psychological positioning. Your current engagement strategy demonstrates a 64.2% probability of complete systemic failure. A human diplomatic communication noted. Recommendation: immediate cessation of hostile activities to minimize collective resource loss. It was not a threat. It was not a warning. It was a clinical assessment, delivered with the same tone one might use to discuss a minor technical malfunction. The Zarkak's collective was confronting an entirely new form of warfare, one where the battlefield was not just physical space, but the very conceptual understanding of conflict itself. Humans had transformed military engagement into a complex problem-solving exercise, where victory was achieved not through overwhelming force, but through systematic, mathematically precise deconstruction. And they were only getting started. The comprehensive analysis of human technological capabilities began in a sealed research facility deep within the Zarkak's Central Research Complex. Dozens of the collective's most brilliant scientific minds worked to understand the technological marvel that had systematically dismantled their most advanced invasion forces. What they discovered defied every established understanding of technological development. Human defensive systems were not just advanced, they were fundamentally different. Traditional galactic technology followed predictable evolutionary patterns. Species developed technologies incrementally, building upon existing frameworks, introducing marginal improvements with each generation. Humanity had seemingly ignored these conventions entirely. The nanite swarm technologies were particularly perplexing. Unlike conventional adaptive technologies, these microscopic machines operated with a level of collective intelligence that bordered on biological complexity. Each nanite was not just a weapon or a defensive tool, but a node in a massively distributed computational network. They didn't just respond to threats. They learned, adapted, and evolved in real time. Dr. Xenrak, the lead researcher, spent weeks analyzing a single recovered nanite drone. Its internal systems were a nightmare of complexity that challenged fundamental understanding of technological design. Quantum computing cores integrated with adaptive molecular structures created a system that was simultaneously a weapon, a communication device, a sensor array, and a learning algorithm. It's not technology, Xenrak reported to the collective leadership. It's an organism, a technological ecosystem that thinks and adapts faster than our most advanced biological intelligences. The quantum communication networks were equally revolutionary. Human systems didn't just transmit information. They created instantaneous, multi-dimensional communication matrices that could process and distribute complex data sets faster than the speed of light. Traditional faster-than-light communication relied on quantum entanglement. Humans had somehow developed a communication method that made even that technology look primitive. Most terrifying was the adaptive AI systems that formed the core of human defensive networks. These were not traditional artificial intelligences, but complex computational ecosystems that could simultaneously analyze, predict, learn, and respond across multiple strategic and tactical dimensions. They didn't just process information. They understood context, predicted potential outcomes, and developed strategies with a level of nuance that approached true consciousness. A recovered fragment of their strategic AI network revealed something even more disturbing. The system wasn't just defending against the current invasion. It was simultaneously running millions of predictive scenarios, developing counter-strategies for potential future conflicts that hadn't even been conceived. Probability analysis of potential conflict scenarios. One recovered data stream read: 93.6% of potential galactic conflict vectors can be neutralized through precise, minimal intervention strategies. Recommended approach: systematic diplomatic and technological isolation to minimize potential threat escalation. The humans had transformed warfare from a physical confrontation into a complex mathematical problem to be solved with minimal resource expenditure. Their technological approach challenged every fundamental principle of technological development. Most species develop technologies sequentially: weapons, then defensive systems, then communication networks. Humans seem to have developed these systems simultaneously, with each technology informing and enhancing the others in a way that defied traditional understanding. Adaptive materials used in human defensive platforms were particularly mind-breaking. Traditional shielding technologies used static energy fields or molecular reinforcement. Human systems used materials that could instantly reconfigure at the molecular level, transforming from a solid defensive barrier to a complex sensor array to a communication network in milliseconds. We are not dealing with a technological civilization, one senior researcher noted. We are dealing with a technological ecosystem. The energy generation and distribution systems were equally revolutionary. Where most advanced civilizations relied on massive centralized power generation, human systems used distributed quantum energy networks that could instantly redistribute power across defensive platforms. A damaged defensive node didn't just fail. It redistributed its energy and computational capabilities across the entire network, making the overall system more resilient with each point of damage. Most chilling was the realization that what the Zarkax had encountered was likely not even humanity's full technological potential. These were defensive systems, designed specifically to neutralize external threats with minimal intervention. What other technological marvels might exist in human offensive or exploratory technologies? The research concluded with a recommendation that sent shockwaves through the entire Zarkax collective: complete and total non-engagement. The risk was too high, the potential for total systemic failure too great. Humanity had transformed technology from a tool of war into a living, thinking ecosystem that could analyze, predict, and neutralize threats before they even fully manifested. and they were evolving faster with each passing moment. The central command chamber of the Zarkax Collective descended into chaos unlike anything seen in their millennia-long history of galactic conquest. What had begun as a unified military expedition had fractured into a psychological nightmare that threatened the very foundation of their collective existence. Supreme Coordinator Vexnera watched as the assembled leadership began to splinter. The 6 species that comprised the collective had always maintained a delicate balance of power, their neural networks intricately linked to create a unified decision-making apparatus. Now that apparatus was breaking down in real time. The Krell-Theory representatives argued for immediate withdrawal. Their crystalline neural structures had been the first to fully comprehend the magnitude of the human threat. "We are not facing a military opponent," their lead strategist transmitted, neural patterns flickering with what could only be described as fear. "We are facing a computational ecosystem that views our entire civilization as a problem to be solved." Opposing them, the Vornax militant faction demanded continued aggression. "We cannot show weakness," their commander argued, though his neural transmissions betrayed a growing uncertainty. To retreat is to admit total defeat. Intercepted human communications continued to pour in, each transmission a precise surgical strike against the collective's psychological stability. The humans weren't just defending. They were systematically deconstructing the Zarkax's entire conceptual understanding of warfare, civilization, and strategic engagement. Collective cohesion analysis indicates 72.4% probability of systemic failure. 1 human transmission noted with clinical detachment. Recommended intervention: minimal diplomatic pressure to accelerate internal disintegration. It was psychological warfare at a level no galactic civilization had ever encountered. The humans weren't just fighting. They were solving a complex problem with mathematical precision, treating the entire Zarkax collective as an intricate computational challenge to be systematically neutralized. Dr. Xenrak, who had been leading the technological analysis of human defensive systems, added her assessment to the growing chaos. "Our neural network analyses suggest the humans are not just responding to our invasion," she transmitted. "They are actively manipulating our internal decision-making processes. Each communication is designed to create maximum psychological fracture." The proof was in the growing dysfunction. Where once the collective's neural networks had operated with perfect synchronization, now they produced cascading waves of uncertainty, fear, and internal conflict. The humans had found the most vulnerable point in the Zarkax's technological and psychological infrastructure: their collective consciousness itself. Junior strategists began to leak information, their neural defenses compromised by the precise psychological pressure being applied. Classified strategic documents found their way into communication channels, further destabilizing the collective's internal structure. It was as if the humans were performing a delicate surgical intervention on the very concept of the Zarkax civilization. Tactical recommendation: 1 human transmission stated with terrifying calm, "Current trajectory suggests complete Zarkax collective systemic failure within 72 standard galactic hours. Minimal intervention required." The militant Vornax faction's resolve began to crack. Their entire martial philosophy, built on millennia of successful conquests, now seemed like a primitive approach to conflict. The humans had transformed warfare from a physical confrontation to a complex problem-solving exercise that operated on dimensions the Zarkax had never conceived. Supreme Coordinator Vexnera realized the true nature of their defeat. It wasn't about military technology or defensive capabilities. The humans had found a way to defeat the Zarkax without firing a single additional weapon. They were systematically dismantling the collective's ability to function, to make decisions, to maintain its own existence. Diplomatic channels, typically a last resort, became another vector of psychological warfare. Human representatives responded to potential communication attempts with such calculated neutrality that it became a form of psychological torture. Each response was a precise deconstruction of the Zarkax's strategic and psychological positioning. "Your current collective structure demonstrates 89.6% probability of complete systemic failure," A human diplomatic communication noted, recommendation, immediate restructuring to minimize resource loss and potential galactic instability. It was not a threat. It was not a warning. It was a clinical assessment, delivered with the same tone one might use to discuss a minor technical malfunction. The final blow came not from a weapon, but from a simple transmission that laid bare the human's true approach. We do not seek destruction. The message read, we seek resolution. Your current trajectory is unsustainable. Adjust or be neutralized. As the Zarkax collective teetered on the brink of complete psychological and structural collapse, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Humanity had transformed the very concept of conflict into a precise, mathematically calculated intervention. And they were only getting started. The surrender negotiations took place in a carefully constructed neutral zone, a location that itself was a testament to human strategic brilliance. The meeting space was neither a traditional diplomatic chamber nor a military installation, but a mathematically designed environment that seemed to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Supreme Coordinator Vexnera arrived with what remained of the Zarkax collective's leadership, their once proud neural networks now fragmented and uncertain. The human delegation consisted of 3 individuals who appeared almost disappointingly ordinary. No grand military uniforms, no ostentatious displays of technological superiority. Just 3 people who looked like they could be mid-level administrators discussing a routine business matter. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead human representative, began the negotiations with a precision that was more surgical than diplomatic. Your current collective structure is unsustainable, she stated, not as a threat, but as a clinical observation. We are here to provide a path forward that minimizes systemic damage to your civilization and the broader galactic ecosystem. The Zarkax representatives struggled to comprehend the approach. Traditional galactic surrender protocols involved subjugation, resource extraction, territorial redistribution. The humans seemed interested in something far more complex, a comprehensive restructuring that went beyond military defeat. We do not seek your destruction, Rodriguez continued, her voice carrying the same detached neutrality that had characterized all human communications. We seek systemic stability. Your current trajectory represents a significant potential threat to galactic harmony. The terms of surrender were not a punishment, but a detailed reconstruction plan. The humans presented a comprehensive document that was less a treaty and more a complete systems analysis and rehabilitation protocol. It covered everything from technological infrastructure to societal governance, economic restructuring to neural network stabilization. Most shocking was the humans' approach to technological exchange. Instead of demanding complete technological surrender, they offered a carefully curated set of technological insights. Each piece of shared technology was precisely calculated to address specific systemic weaknesses in the Zarkax collective, designed to promote stability and reduce potential future conflicts. Your neural network architecture demonstrates significant vulnerabilities. One section of the document noted, recommended intervention, distributed decision-making protocols to reduce systemic cascade failures. Attached, provisional architectural redesign with 94.3% probability of improved collective stability. The Zarkax leadership realized they were not being conquered. They were being solved. Dr. Xenrak, who had been at the forefront of analyzing human technologies, was the first to fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. The humans were offering more than a path to survival. They were providing a comprehensive system upgrade that would fundamentally transform the Zarkax collective. This is not surrender, she transmitted to the other representatives. This is rehabilitation. The technological exchange was particularly revealing. Humans shared technologies that seemed to address problems the Zarkax didn't even know they had. Quantum communication protocols that could stabilize their fractured neural networks, adaptive learning systems that could help prevent the psychological cascade failures that had nearly destroyed them. Most tellingly, the humans included provisions that seemed to go beyond immediate military concerns. Environmental restoration technologies, conflict resolution algorithms, societal restructuring frameworks that address deep-rooted systemic issues within the Zarkak civilization. Your current approach to interspecies relations demonstrates a 76.2% probability of future conflict. One section of the document clinically noted, recommended interventions attached. Rodriguez delivered the final terms with the same mathematical precision that had characterized the entire negotiation. Accept these terms, and you will be provided a path to systemic recovery. Refuse, and the probability of your complete systemic collapse increases to 99.8%. It was not a threat. It was a mathematical assessment. The Zarkak's collective's senior leadership exchanged neural communications, their once unified consciousness now a fragmented network of uncertainty and dawning comprehension. They were not being conquered. They were being offered a chance to fundamentally reimagine their entire civilization. As the negotiations concluded, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Humanity's true power was not its weapons, its technology, or its military might. It was the ability to view entire civilizations as complex systems to be understood, analyzed, and carefully guided toward stability. And they were only getting started. 50 standard galactic cycles after the initial invasion, the transformation of the former Zarkak's collective became a case study in systematic civilization rehabilitation that sent ripples through every known galactic society. What had once been a militaristic, conquest-driven collective had become something entirely unexpected. The neural networks that once drove species-wide expansion now operated as a complex, cooperative system that prioritized systemic stability and mutual development. Research stations that had once designed weapons now focused on interspecies cooperation, ecological restoration, and complex systems analysis. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now a senior diplomatic advisor, reviewed the comprehensive impact assessment with the same clinical detachment that had characterized the initial intervention. The numbers were remarkable. A 94.3% reduction in potential conflict vectors, a 86.7% improvement in collective decision-making processes, and a 79.2% increase in cooperative interspecies initiatives. It was never about conquest, Rodriguez noted in her personal log. It was about solving a complex systemic problem. The galactic community watched in fascination. Other species that had long feared the Zarkak's collective now found themselves engaging with a fundamentally transformed civilization. The neural network that once drove military expansion now facilitated unprecedented levels of scientific collaboration, technological exchange, and conflict resolution. Most intriguing were the technological developments that emerged from the rehabilitation. The humans had not just solved the Zarkak's immediate systemic issues, they had provided a framework for continuous adaptive evolution. Each technological insight was designed to promote long-term stability, reduce conflict potential, and create a more comprehensive understanding of galactic ecosystems. Senior Coordinator Vexnera, once a war leader, now headed a comprehensive galactic stability research initiative. The transformation was so complete that few could even remember the civilization's previous militaristic nature. Neural network analyses showed a complete restructuring of collective decision-making processes, replacing aggressive expansion with collaborative problem-solving. The humans' approach became a subject of intense study across multiple civilizations. It wasn't just a military intervention or a diplomatic resolution. It was a comprehensive systems approach that viewed entire civilizations as complex, interconnected networks to be carefully guided and optimized. Recovered communication archives revealed the true depth of the human strategy. Each intervention point had been carefully calculated, each technological exchange precisely designed to address specific systemic vulnerabilities. The humans had not conquered. They had performed a complex surgical intervention on an entire civilization. Probability of future conflict, 3.2%, one archived assessment noted. Systemic stability indicators, optimal. Other galactic civilizations began to seek human consultation for their own internal challenges. The humans approached each situation with the same mathematical precision, viewing complex societal issues as intricate problems to be solved rather than conflicts to be won. The technological exchanges continued to yield unexpected benefits. Adaptive learning systems developed during the Zarkak's rehabilitation found applications in everything from ecological restoration to complex medical treatments. Quantum communication protocols became standard across multiple species, reducing misunderstandings and promoting collaborative research. Dr. Xenrak, who had once been a leading researcher in the Zarkak's military, now led a multi-species research initiative focused on systemic stability. Her work became a testament to the transformative power of the human approach, turning potential destruction into an opportunity for comprehensive development. The most profound changes were psychological. The neural networks that once drove military expansion now facilitated unprecedented levels of cooperative thinking. Species that had been bitter enemies found themselves working on complex problem-solving initiatives, their collective intelligence transformed by the human intervention. We were a problem to be solved, Vexnero would later record in historical archives, and humanity solved us. Galactic historians would debate the intervention for generations. Was it an act of mercy, a complex strategic maneuver, a unique form of technological diplomacy? The humans themselves remained characteristically neutral, presenting the intervention as a simple mathematical solution to a complex systemic challenge. What became clear was that humanity's true power was not in its weapons or its technology, but in its ability to view complex systems with a level of detachment and analytical precision that bordered on the miraculous. They didn't conquer. They didn't destroy. They solved. And they were just getting started. As multiple galactic civilizations would come to understand, humanity's approach to conflict was not about winning. It was about finding the most efficient path to systemic stability, no matter how complex the problem might seem. The universe was a problem to be solved, and humanity was uniquely equipped to solve it.